Hello, and welcome to the Jared Hurst Podcast. This podcast is about understanding ourselves, others, and the tools you can use in order to transform your life. This week, I want to talk with you about a topic that I picked out a few weeks ago. Now, you may have, if you're somebody that listens to the podcast regularly, but you haven't been paying attention to my social media, you're maybe thinking, Jared, where did you go? Why have we not had a podcast in the last few weeks? Well, the first and most important reason is I got really sick. That sickness took a lot out of me. I just didn't feel that I was capable of delivering the type of podcast that I wanted to give to the public. I want to make sure that any time that I'm speaking, that it is providing something of value. The other thing is, interestingly enough, I picked out this topic a few weeks ago, and then I started having struggles around that area. And the topic that I want to talk about is spirituality and religion in an analytical and logical world. I think that is such a fascinating topic. It's something that I was thinking about. And if you've been paying attention or you've listened, or even if you haven't, I've been going through a bit of a spiritual awakening this year. I've had a number of times where I've been looking at my belief system and I've been looking at life and I've been trying to see what is right for me. And I've had things that have kind of just fell into my lap. Well, when I decided that I wanted to talk about how we can have spirituality and we can have religion in this analytical and logical world, a lot of the reason that I wanted to talk with you about that topic is because it's something that is true to me. I'm a very analytical, logical person, and I feel like whenever I'm sharing a topic, whenever I am talking about something on my podcast, the whole point of it is to help somebody else out there that is struggling with things or doesn't quite know how to look at things. And so I want to be able to share my perspective, the things that I've gone through, in hopes that the things that I'm experiencing and the ways that I look at things might be of help to somebody else that is going through their journey on that similar topic. Well, interestingly enough, as this happens a lot, and this is interesting that this happens because it ties into what I'm talking about. A lot of the times when we make a decision, all of a sudden we start seeing things pop up in our life. We start seeing challenges. We start seeing blessings. We start seeing new lines of thinking or information. Things just start to happen when we make decisions. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that in your life, you make a massive decision, or even not even like a massive decision, but you make a decision and then all of a sudden you see these things show up in different ways. Either the decision that you make gets challenged, all of a sudden you have something really difficult come into your life, all of a sudden you start having things flow, all of a sudden you start having information related to the topic that you're thinking about just show up in your life. Well, that's interesting that happens, because I choose to believe that that is a sign of something greater than ourselves. And one of the things that really happened to me over the last couple of weeks, something that really challenged me, is there's this scientific study that I'd heard referenced. I've probably heard about this for about a decade, maybe a little bit less. But I'd heard people reference a study in which supposedly the way that we interact with a glass of water affects the way that it freezes. In other words, if I have this big glass of water, I yell, scream at it, I'm cruel to it, and then I freeze it, then those crystal patterns are different than if I'm kind to it and loving to it and then freeze it. And I always thought that was such a cool study, the idea that our emotions have the ability to affect something outside of us. And in a lot of ways, that was part of the foundation of my spirituality. Part of my belief system was this idea that our energy can affect other things outside of ourselves. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. And I'd heard it referenced in podcasts, I'd heard it referenced in books, I'd heard it referenced in musical concerts. And then I went to go find this study because I kind of wanted to read about it, and I couldn't find any reference to it. In fact, the only thing that I could find was apparently there was a book written by somebody stating this, and in this article that I read, they said that there's never been any scientific studies that have been able to substantiate this claim. Well, that was really difficult for me. It was hard for me to feel like something that I want to believe that there are things that science can't explain. I want to believe that there are these beautiful things that affect our life in deep, meaningful ways, but we don't have an explanation for it. And so I started looking into other things. I don't know if you've ever heard of the idea that science can't explain how a bumblebee is able to fly. I thought, oh, there we go. There's something that science can't explain. And then I searched for it, and they're like, that's not true. I'm like, crap. So then I started looking at other things, where things that I knew of that were kind of in the mystical and the spiritual realm, that I knew that they had scientific data that backed up those things, like images and spectrometry readings and different things like that. And everything that I went to go look at I found articles that said that it wasn't true. And that was really hard for me. And I couldn't understand why I was feeling all this strong emotion around this experience. And I realized that it's because on some level I felt deceived. That there were these things that I cared about, these things that I believed in, and I was basing them off of knowledge that I was told was factual. And then as I started to dig into it, found was not substantiated and supported by science. That was really hard for me. Part of the reason why I started diving into this is because I was having a conversation with somebody. And this conversation with this person that I was talking to, they are incredibly anti-religion. They believe that religion is lies and deceit, and that those lies and deceit are harmful and hurtful to anybody that lives those things. And I had to sit there and I had to look at that and I had to analyze that. And there was a couple of things that I had to explore within myself, things that I had to look at and ask myself, well, what are my beliefs? And there's a couple of key beliefs that come into my mind. One, I believe that people have the right to choose to believe what they want. Do I believe that people have agency and that they deserve to believe something that is not true? And I do. I believe that we have agency. Regardless of whether you look at it from a religious standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, just from a purely secular standpoint, I believe people have the right to agency. They have the right to govern their lives. Now, there's definitely some gray areas there where your rights impose on other people's rights, and there's obviously some very controversial topics that I could get into. I don't want to go down that road. The point is in general, I believe people have the right to believe what they want. The other thing is I had to ask myself, is it always true that living a lie or believing something that is not true is detrimental to that individual? And I had to say no. Can it be detrimental? 100%. There are moments in our lives where when we choose to believe something that isn't true, that belief can end up coming and hurting us in different ways. But are there ways in which we could be better off believing something that isn't true than if we actually knew the truth? Yeah, I can think of a lot of benefits. And so I started looking at things from this very analytical, logical way of saying, well, what if? What if I choose to believe in God, if I choose to believe in spirituality, if I choose to believe in energy, crystals, karma, law of attraction, manifestation, auras, there's all these different beliefs and ideas that are out there. Now, if I choose to believe those things, what if I find out that that is not true? Let's play the what if game. And I started looking at it and I started saying, well, what are the benefits of me believing this thing? And the other thing is, it's not always cut and dry about whether something is true or not, right? It might not be true. So we'll use religion. If I believe in God. Now, there's lots of people out there that could say that I am believing, if I choose to believe in God, that I'm believing in something that is not true. First off, I would argue that is incredibly difficult to prove or disprove, right? To prove the existence of God, to disprove the existence of God, that's a really challenging thing. This isn't like trying to prove whether or not, a rock has some type of vibrational frequency. There's tests and things that we can do, but it's really difficult to prove that there isn't some all-powerful being out there, right? And so I started looking at it and say, all right, what do I gain from having this belief? Because I know that beliefs are a huge factor in the life that we live. The things that you believe drive your actions, drive your emotions, drive your coping mechanisms, drive your fears, drive your hopes. There's all these things that come from belief. I don't have to debate that. I have no question that your beliefs and the things that you think and your perceptions change your reality. I don't think there's very many people out there that would argue with me on that. I think most people can recognize that the things we believe influence our life. So let's say that I believe in this. I believe in an all-powerful God. I believe that there's something greater than me that loves me and is looking out for me. So first, I choose to believe that as an analytical, logical person because I look and I see evidence of it. I look at my life and I think to myself, there are times that I have made decisions in my mind, have not even had anything of that realm of thought in my head prior, have had no conversations with people, no internet searches. There's nothing where I can say, well, the all-powerful Google or Facebook figured out that I'm interested in this because I did a search or because I said something out loud. Like, I haven't said anything out loud. I haven't done any searches. I haven't done anything that anybody outside of somebody with the ability to read my mind should know what I'm thinking at this point. And then I have had challenges show up into my life that are directly related to the thing that I'm thinking about. And that challenge is there, and you can see a direct correlation where it's an opportunity for me to have the thing that I've been thinking about. Or I've made a decision and all of a sudden I received a phone call, and that phone call was directly related to what I'm thinking about. Or I've had an opportunity show up, or I've had this, or I can't tell you the number of times in my life where I have made decisions, thought about things, had questions, whatever it might be, made a decision, and then had things directly related to that thing pop up in my life in some way, form, or another. Whether it's information, challenges, opportunities, whatever. And I think if you look at your life, you can see that as well. So from an analytical, logical person that wants to believe in the spiritual and the religious, I can see evidence in my life that something outside of myself exists that is able to recognize these things. To me, that is all the evidence I need. I want to believe in something more powerful than me. I want to believe in something that loves me and cares about me. if for no other reason than the benefits that come into my life. So remember I talked about playing the what if game. So let's play the what if game. If I believe that there is something more powerful and greater than me that loves and cares about me, what are the benefits to that? Well, I have a certain level of certainty that comes into my life because it's not just me trying to accomplish the goals and things of my life. There is something more powerful than me trying to help me. So I'm going to feel safer. I'm going to feel a stronger sense of the ability to accomplish my goal. I'm going to be more resilient. I'm going to be more driven. I'm going to feel less fear. Like all the things that come from believing in something greater than you. Sure, if I'm wrong, we'll play the what if game. What if I'm wrong and there is nothing greater? Well, I still got all those benefits. I still had more certainty in my life. I still had more sense of purpose in my life. I still had less fear in my life. I still believed in my ability to accomplish my goals more. I had all of these benefits in my life because I believed in something that if in this scenario I know is not true, I still would have had a life where I received those benefits. You see what I'm saying? So just because something might not be true doesn't even mean that believing in it is going to end up being a detriment to us. Now, are there negative things that could come from that situation? Sure. Let's say that I'm somebody and I believe in this all-powerful being, and I believe that this all-powerful being is hypercritical of me. And that it's constantly this individual or personage or entity or whatever it might be is constantly judging me, and I have to live up to those ideals of this belief system, of this entity. Now, could that be a negative? Yes. You can choose to have a lot of pressure from something like that, to constantly feel like you're insufficient, that you're not able to live up to these lofty standards. And there's a lot of different, I don't want to go down this road too deep, but the point is there are negatives. There are potential negatives. Are there ways to circumvent those potential negatives? Of course, if I believe that there's a God that has commandments for me, that has standards for me, that has things that I have to live up to, and I recognize that some of those things could be used by myself in order to hurt my self-esteem, in order to use it as a way to be self-critical, then I can say to myself, I don't want to be critical of myself. So I'm going to look at this belief system, and I'm going to look at the way that I look at this deity and say, how can I keep from being overly critical of myself? How can I choose to be loving and compassionate and kind to myself? Right? So just because something has potential negatives doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to see those potential negatives and address those. I know what I'm doing here is kind of an interesting process of looking at things like spirituality, looking at religion, and looking at them from an analytical viewpoint. But I just hope that you can use this and see where these things can be true for you and allow you to make the decision that's right for you. If you feel like your beliefs are being challenged, like mine recently have, I had to ask myself if this one scientific study that I believed was out there is not true, and then all these other things that I believed were true were not true, does that immediately discredit the other beliefs that I have? No. I prefer to have some things in my life where I feel like there is evidence supporting the beliefs that I choose to have. But at some point, you have to get out of your head and lead with your heart. And that's something that I struggle with at times. There's times where I get too much in my head. I overthink a relationship. I overthink a spiritual belief. I overthink an action. And what I need to do is, at some point, I need to get out of here and turn the deciding and the decision making over to here, into my heart. And say to myself, you know what? I've already looked at this with my head. I've looked at the potential possibilities of this being inaccurate and said to myself, can I live with that? What are the negatives? What are the positives of this belief system? And here's the thing that really resonates with me. If I'm going to have a belief system, is it in alignment with my values and my goals? If my value system and my goal system is to be loving, kind, make the world a better place, help others to have better self-esteem, have better coping mechanisms with the difficult emotions and things that come into their life, and those are my goals, does this belief system that I'm choosing to adopt, does it support those values and those goals that I have? And if it does, then who cares? Who cares if I'm wrong? And the reality is a lot of the things that I'll never know for sure. I'll never know for certain whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. One day I'm going to die. And either there's going to be something after this life, and I'm going to be like, dang, I'm so grateful that I chose to have this belief throughout my life. Or there won't be anything, and I won't even be around to feel regret. And then if I could somehow look back at my life and say, well, you were wrong, be like, well, was that really that bad? Was it really that bad that I was wrong? Did I lose out on that much? Or did I gain a lot of things through the belief that I chose to have? So that's kind of the way that I've been approaching the world. The way I've been approaching life is I've been looking at it and saying, this thing, I'm going to suspend my logical brain. I'm going to stop looking for evidence and proof of everything that I'm looking at, and I'm going to test it. All right, you've told me that there are auras. You've told me that there are ways in order for me to see a power around myself in the way that I am doing it. I'm going to choose to believe that for a while, and I'm going to test it. I'm going to do different things and see whether or not I believe in it. I mean, I look at it with manifesting. I've been reading this book on manifesting. And so what I've been doing is I've been trying to watch my energy. I've been trying to watch the way that I look at the world. And the way that this book teaches manifesting is about staying in a state of love and staying in a state of positive emotion. Now, I feel that it's important to feel and process negative emotion, 100%. But then, as much as I can, I try to put myself in a positive emotional state. And can I see things being attracted into my life? Yes. Are there possible logical explanations on how those things came into my life? Yes. Does that matter? If it came into my life because of a logical, explainable course of action, or came into my life because of some mystical power that science doesn't have the ability to understand or comprehend, does it matter? I still got the result I wanted by having this belief. So what's the harm in having it? If I look and I see the possible pitfalls and I circumvent those the best that I can, and it's benefiting my life and it's bringing positive, incredible blessings into my life, then so be it. That's what I want. That's what I want is the result. So I test it and I try it and I see what happens and I decide what I choose to believe off things, and then I keep doing it. I do this and I choose to believe it. I do this and I choose to believe it and say, all right, is this for me? Is this not for me? And that doesn't mean that I bury my head in the sand. It doesn't mean that I stop trying to understand things. It doesn't mean that I stop seeking truth. But I also recognize that truth is not definitive. I mean, one of the examples that came into my mind as I was thinking all of this is childbirth. Bear with me for a moment. We live in a world where there are 8 billion people? There's been, I'll just throw out a number. We'll say 30 billion people that have existed in the time that we have had this planet, depending on who you believe and how you look at things and religion and all that stuff. So if you were to look at science experiments, 30 billion science experiments is an awful lot of science experiments. If you look at each birth as as basically a science experiment, we should know a whole heck of a lot about childbirth at this point, wouldn't you think? I mean, we've all been born. Every person that exists is another example of childbirth. And I look at my life, and in the last 40 years, the way that they believe that we should put a child in bed when they sleep is different. When I was a kid, they told my parents to put me on my stomach. When I was a parent, they told my child that they should be on their back or maybe their side. Then the point is it's changed. How we are told to parent and what we are told to do with a child has changed. What we should do with the umbilical cord. I remember back when I was first a parent, we were told that we were supposed to clean the umbilical cord. And then a couple of years later, my youngest daughter was born and they told us not to clean the umbilical cord. My point is things are changing. Things have changed in the last 40 years around the thing that we have almost more scientific experience around than anything else, human life. And the way that we look at things has changed during that time. What they believe you should do with the placenta has changed from 40 years ago until now. Because things are changing, scientific evidence, the way that we have to study things. My point is if you want to live in this world and you want to choose to believe in something that can't be proven by science, that maybe even has evidence that say that it doesn't exist, that doesn't mean that they're right. I'm sorry. There's just too much stuff out there that I'm not saying science is bad. I'm not saying that every little conspiracy theory is true. I'm just saying, look at things with an open mind and recognize that just because you're being told one thing today doesn't mean that you're going to be told that exact same thing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So look at that thing with your head. Look at that thing with your heart. Look at the pros, look at the cons, and make the decision that feels right to you. You are the one that has to decide what kind of life you want to live. You're the one that has to suffer the consequences of your decisions. And you may make a decision and you may turn down the road and you may look back on it and say, man, I made the wrong decision. But at least you can say that you made the decision that you felt was right for you at that point in your life. I think that's a much better way to go about living life than to go back and allow somebody else to make every decision for you, to decide what is right for you and what is wrong for you because they say it's true. Everybody has the right to agency, the right to choose what's right for them and how they choose to live their life. To a point. We obviously need to look at other people's rights in the way that we affect those lives as well. But that's another debate and another podcast. I hope there's some things here in what I've talked about today where you can take this and you can say, you know what? I hadn't looked at things from that way. What if I'm wrong? Am I still okay with the decision that I'm making? What if I'm right? Am I okay with the decision that I'm making? How can I benefit? How can I circumvent negative possibilities that could come from this belief in my life? And then make what's right for you. Study it out, test it. Feel it in your heart. I believe in you. I know you can do it. And until next week, remember that you are not alone.